Few names in maritime history evoke as much emotion as the RMS Titanic. She was the largest and most luxurious ship of her era, a floating palace that embodied the confidence, ambition, and optimism of the early 20th century. Her story is not merely one of tragedy, but also one of innovation, human aspiration, and the desire to conquer nature. The Titanic was more than a ship. She was a symbol of technological progress. She represented the golden age of transatlantic travel, when wealthy passengers crossed oceans not only to reach new destinations, but to do so in comfort and style. Her sinking on April 15, 1912, became one of the most haunting maritime disasters in history, searing her name into the collective memory of humankind. Today, more than a century later, the Titanic continues to fascinate historians, engineers, and the public. Her story has been told in countless books, films, and documentaries. Yet to truly understand her, one must go back to the era in which she was conceived, an age of steam, steel, and relentless competition on the high seas. The early 1900s were the pinnacle of the ocean liner era. Steamships had replaced sailing vessels as the primary mode of transoceanic travel, connecting Europe and America in record time. Shipping companies competed fiercely for passengers, especially the lucrative first-class clientele who demanded ever greater luxury and speed. Two major players dominated the North Atlantic route, the British-based Cunard Line and the White Star Line. Cunard had recently launched the Lusitania and Mauretania, two sleek greyhounds of the sea that held the coveted blue rebound for fastest crossing of the Atlantic. Their speed was unmatched, but speed was not the only prize to be won. White Star Line, under the direction of J. Bruce Ismay, decided to pursue a different strategy. Instead of competing purely on speed, they would build ships that were bigger, more comfortable, and more elegant than any others afloat. These ships would be destinations in themselves, floating cities where passengers could enjoy a life of leisure as they crossed the ocean. Thus was born the idea for the Olympic-class liners. Three sister ships, Olympic, Titanic, and later Britannic. Each would be a marvel of engineering, a testament to the might of British shipbuilding, and a challenge to the supremacy of Cunard. The responsibility for designing these great liners fell to the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, Northern Ireland, where some of the most skilled naval architects of the age were employed. The chief designer was Alexander Carlisle, later succeeded by Thomas Andrews, a man whose name would forever be linked with Titanic. Planning for the ships began in 1907. The aim was to create vessels that were not only the largest ever built, but also the safest and most comfortable. Every detail was considered, from the strength of the hull to the arrangement of the staterooms, from the layout of the dining saloons to the number of lifeboats. The Titanic was designed to be slightly larger than her sister Olympic, measuring about 882 feet long and weighing over 46,000 gross tons. Her hull was to be constructed of steel plates riveted together, and she would be divided into 16 watertight compartments. The ship was considered virtually unsinkable because she could stay afloat even if up to 4 of these compartments were flooded. Inside, Titanic would boast unparalleled luxury. The first-class accommodations were comparable to the finest hotels in Europe, with grand staircases, smoking rooms paneled in rich wood, a Parisian-style café, a Turkish bath, and a swimming pool, a rarity at sea. Even second-class passengers enjoyed a level of comfort that rivaled first class on many other ships. The engines were to be among the most powerful afloat, consisting of 2 massive reciprocating steam engines and a low-pressure Parsons turbine driving 3 propellers. This arrangement allowed for a smooth and efficient passage across the Atlantic with a top speed of around 23 knots, not the fastest, but more than sufficient for a comfortable schedule. Construction of the Titanic began on March 31st, 1909 in the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast. The project was one of the most ambitious engineering undertakings of its time, involving thousands of workers, massive steel components, and unprecedented logistical challenges. The ship's keel was laid on slipway number 3, alongside her sister, ship Olympic. The two great vessels rose side by side, their frames climbing higher with each passing week until they towered above the surrounding yard like twin iron cathedrals. Workers referred to them as the two monsters. And even from a distance, the sight of their growing hulls inspired awe. More than 15,000 workers were employed in the shipyard at the peak of construction. Riveters, carpenters, electricians, and machinists labored day and night. The work was dangerous and often exhausting. Accidents were common, and several men lost their lives before Titanic was even complete. Despite these hardships, progress continued steadily, driven by the pride of building the largest moving object in the world. By the spring of 1911, Titanic's hull was ready for launching. On May 31st, 1911, a crowd of more than 100,000 spectators gathered to witness the spectacle. At 12:13 p.m., the massive ship slid down the slipway into the water, aided by 22 tons of tallow, soap, and grease. The launch was a success, and for the first time, Titanic floated on her own, fitting out, bringing the ship to life. After her launch, Titanic entered the fitting out basin, where workmen installed her engines, funnels, masts, lifeboats, and luxurious interiors. This phase took nearly a year and involved extraordinary attention to detail. The interiors were designed to rival the finest hotels, with lavish decoration in Edwardian style, including gilded ceilings, oak paneling, and plush carpeting. The famous grand staircase, with its wrought iron balustrades and domed glass skylight, became the centerpiece of first-class life aboard the ship. Every room was furnished with elegance and precision, from the opulent first-class dining saloon, which could seat over 500 guests, to the cozy reading and writing rooms, where passengers could enjoy a quiet moment at sea. As the ship neared completion, Harland and Wolff and White Star Line engineers conducted extensive inspections. Lifeboats were swung out on their davits, bulkhead doors were tested, and engines were run to ensure that everything functioned as intended. By early 1912, the Titanic was ready for her sea trials. Technical specifications, the pride of the White Star Line. The Titanic was an engineering marvel of her time, blending power, size, and luxury in a way no other ship had yet achieved. Length, 882 feet, 9 inches, 269 meters. Beam, width, 92 feet, 6 inches, 28. 2 meters. Gross tonnage, 46,328 tons. Propulsion, 2 quadruple expansion steam engines plus 1 low-pressure Parsons turbine, driving 3 propellers. Speed, service speed of 21 knots, maximum around 23 knots. Funnels, 4, 3 functional, 1 for ventilation and aesthetic balance. Masts, 2 crew, about 885 officers and crew members. Passenger capacity, approximately 2,435 passengers across 3 classes lifeboats, 20 total, 14 standard wooden lifeboats, 4 collapsibles, and 2 emergency cutters, capable of holding just over 1,170 people, far fewer than the ship's total capacity. Safety features included watertight bulkheads with electric doors that could be closed from the bridge, a double bottom, and a sophisticated Marconi wireless telegraphy system. These innovations contributed to the popular belief that the ship was practically unsinkable. Sea trials, the first taste of the Atlantic. On April 2, 1912, Titanic departed Belfast for her sea trials in the Irish Sea. A team of engineers, officials, and crew tested the ship's speed, maneuverability, and equipment. The ship performed admirably, reaching her expected maximum speed and proving to be a remarkably smooth ride for such a massive vessel. Captain Edward John Smith, a seasoned commander who had captained Olympic, was given command of the new ship. For Smith, this maiden voyage would be his last before retirement, a crowning achievement in a long and distinguished career. Satisfied with her performance, the inspectors signed off on Titanic's readiness, and she set sail for Southampton, England, where she would take on passengers for her much-anticipated maiden voyage across the Atlantic. On the morning of April 10th, 1912, Southampton buzzed with excitement. The Titanic, resplendent and gleaming, was moored at White Star Dock, towering over every other vessel in the harbor. Long lines of passengers filed through the terminal, luggage carts rattled along the quay, and porters carried trunks to the gangways. It was a moment of both grandeur and routine, another ocean liner leaving port, but this time the world was watching. First-class passengers arrived in carriages and motor cars, some with personal servants in tow. Aristocrats, businessmen, celebrities, and wealthy travelers were among the elite group embarking on this maiden voyage. Meanwhile, hundreds of second- and third-class passengers, emigrants from Ireland, Scandinavia, and Eastern Europe, queued patiently, their dreams of a new life in America just days away from being fulfilled. At precisely noon, the Titanic's mooring lines were cast off, and tugs guided her slowly down the river Test. As she passed the New York, a smaller liner moored nearby, the tremendous suction of Titanic's propellers nearly caused a collision, snapping the New York's mooring ropes and swinging her dangerously close. Quick action by harbor tugs averted disaster, and the incident was seen as an ill omen by some onlookers. Nonetheless, the great ship steamed ahead toward Cherbourg, France, for her next stop. Life at sea, a floating palace. Once clear of the English coast, Titanic settled into her transatlantic routine. For first-class passengers, life aboard was a social event of the highest order. The dining saloon served exquisite meals prepared by world-class chefs, featuring multiple courses and fine wines. Guests strolled the wide promenades, enjoyed music from the ship's orchestra, and gathered in the smoking room or the Café Parisien for conversation. Second-class passengers enjoyed more modest but still comfortable accommodations, with well-appointed cabins and access to a library and their own dining saloon. Third-class passengers, though placed deep within the ship, found their quarters clean and more spacious than on most other liners of the day. They had open spaces for recreation and music rooms where fiddlers played late into the night. The ship's crew kept everything running with precision. Engineers maintained the massive boilers, stokers shoveled coal in shifts around the clock, and the wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, sent a constant stream of telegrams for passengers. The weather was calm, and the sea almost eerily smooth, reflecting the moonlight like a sheet of glass. Captain Smith and his officers maintained a steady course, confident that they would make New York on schedule, perhaps even early. Ice warnings and calm waters. By April 13th and 14th, wireless messages began arriving from other ships warning of icebergs and pack ice in the North Atlantic shipping lanes. Captain Smith and his officers posted the warnings on the bridge and adjusted the course slightly southward, but they did not significantly reduce speed. That Sunday, April 14th, was a bright and beautiful day at sea. The passengers attended church services, strolled the decks, and enjoyed the crisp, clear air. By evening, the temperature dropped noticeably, and the sea became unusually still, a classic sign of nearby ice. At 9:40 p.m., the Mesaba sent a warning of heavy pack ice, great number of bergs. Phillips, the wireless operator, acknowledged the message but did not deliver it immediately to the bridge as he was busy sending passenger telegrams. Collision with the iceberg. At 11:40 p.m., lookouts. Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, stationed in the crow's nest, spotted a dark shape directly ahead, an iceberg. Fleet rang the warning bell 3 times and telephoned the bridge. "Iceberg, right ahead." First Officer William Murdoch ordered "hard a starboard" and reversed the engines. The ship began to turn, but there was not enough time. The starboard side scraped along the submerged ice, opening a series of gashes below the waterline. The collision was surprisingly gentle. Many passengers felt only a slight shudder. Within minutes, however, water began flooding the forward compartments. Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, inspected the damage and grimly informed Captain Smith the Titanic would sink. She could stay afloat with any 2 or 3 of her forward compartments flooded, but not 5. The unthinkable had happened. The unsinkable ship was doomed. The evacuation, courage and confusion. At 12:05 a.m., orders were given to uncover the lifeboats. Crew members roused passengers from their cabins, urging them to dress warmly and go to the boat deck. At first, many were reluctant. The ship seemed safe, and the night was cold and calm. Some returned to their cabins, unwilling to leave the comfort of the ship. By 12:45 a.m., the first lifeboat, number 7, was lowered with only 28 people aboard, though it had room for 65. Many boats were launched partially filled as passengers still hesitated and crew were unsure of procedures. Gradually, as the bow sank lower and the list grew more pronounced, the seriousness of the situation became clear and panic spread. Distress rockets were fired into the sky, and the wireless operators sent the CQD and SOS signals repeatedly, hoping another ship was close enough to assist. The Carpathia, 58 miles away, responded and began steaming toward the disaster at full speed. After the collision with the iceberg, Titanic continued moving forward for several minutes before slowly coming to a halt. Deep within her massive hull, the sound of rushing water could be heard, flooding the forward compartments. Engineers and stokers worked frantically to assess the damage, their lanterns casting eerie shadows against the steel walls. On the upper decks, most passengers remained calm. Many had felt only a slight shudder and believed there was no cause for alarm. Stewards walked through the corridors, knocking on doors and politely instructing guests to put on life jackets and proceed to the boat deck. Few obeyed immediately. Some passengers continued drinking tea in the lounges. Others played cards, unaware that their lives were now measured in hours. When the order was finally given to uncover the lifeboats, the mood aboard shifted dramatically. The crew faced a daunting task. There were over 2,200 souls on board, but lifeboats for barely half. Women and children first was the rule, but many women hesitated to leave their husbands behind, certain that Titanic would stay afloat until rescue arrived. The first lifeboats were lowered half empty, a decision that would haunt the survivors forever. The ship's list grew steeper with each passing minute, and a rising sense of dread spread among the passengers. The night air was bitterly cold, and the black ocean stretched endlessly in all directions, offering no hope. As the bow sank lower, the stern of Titanic began to rise out of the water, her enormous propellers gleaming in the moonlight. Hundreds of passengers still crowded the decks. Some prayed, some sang hymns, and all the while, Titanic's band continued to play. Soft, haunting melodies meant to bring comfort in the face of the inevitable. Then came the breaking point. Somewhere deep inside the hull, a thunderous crack echoed. The ship split in two, the bow disappearing beneath the surface as the stern crashed back down, only to rise again, nearly vertical, before sliding into the icy depths. Screams filled the night as hundreds were thrown into the freezing sea. Within minutes, the cries grew fewer, fading into the vast silence of the Atlantic. Lifeboats floated at a distance, their occupants staring in stunned disbelief at the empty, moonlit waters. The survivors shivered in the frigid air, huddled together for warmth, whispering prayers. For more than an hour, they waited until lights appeared on the horizon, the steamship Carpathia. She had raced through the night, dodging icebergs to reach the coordinates sent by Titanic's distress calls. By dawn, the sea was calm once again, littered only with wreckage. The unsinkable ship was gone. As the first rays of sunlight broke over the Atlantic, the full magnitude of the disaster became visible. The lifeboats, scattered across the still waters, began to row toward the approaching Carpathia. Captain Arthur Rostron and his crew worked tirelessly to bring survivors aboard, lowering rope ladders and slings to hoist the exhausted, half-frozen passengers from the sea. One by one, men, women, and children were helped onto the deck, where blankets and hot drinks awaited them. Many were in shock, silent and pale, unable to comprehend what they had just endured. Others wept uncontrollably as they realized loved ones had been lost forever. By the time the last boat was emptied, only about 710 people had been saved, barely a third of those who had sailed aboard Titanic. For the next 3 days, Carpathia steamed toward New York, carrying both the survivors and the heavy weight of tragedy. The decks were quiet. Survivors gathered in small groups, sharing memories of the ship and the terrible night. Lists of the missing were compiled and transmitted by wireless, where anxious families on shore waited for news. When Carpathia finally arrived in New York Harbor on the evening of April 18, 1912, thousands of people lined the docks. Reporters, photographers, and grieving relatives crowded the piers, straining for a glimpse of the survivors. The city was draped in mourning. Flags flew at half-mast. Even those who had never set foot on an ocean liner felt the loss keenly. Titanic had been a symbol of human progress, and now she lay at the bottom of the sea. In the weeks that followed, both the United States Senate and the British Board of Trade launched formal inquiries. Witnesses, from surviving officers to passengers, gave harrowing testimonies about the night of April 14th. The investigations revealed a series of tragic missteps: too few lifeboats, warnings of icebergs ignored or misunderstood, and the ship's speed not reduced despite dangerous conditions. From these inquiries came sweeping reforms. International maritime laws were changed to require lifeboat space for every person on board, regular lifeboat drills, and 24-hour manned wireless communications on all passenger ships. Out of Titanic's loss emerged a safer era of ocean travel, though the memory of those who perished could never be erased. For decades, Titanic rested undisturbed on the ocean floor, nearly 2.5 miles beneath the surface. She became the subject of countless books, poems, and legends, a ghost ship of memory. In 1985, a joint American-French expedition finally discovered her remains. Images of the rusting bow, still majestic in its silence, captivated the world. Since then, Titanic has remained a powerful cultural symbol. Museums, documentaries, and films have kept her story alive, reminding each generation of both the grandeur and fragility of human ambition. Her tale continues to fascinate because it speaks to something timeless: the dream of progress, the tragedy of hubris, and the strength of the human spirit in the face of disaster. Titanic's story is more than just the account of a shipwreck. It is the story of an age of confidence, a moment when humanity believed it had conquered nature, only to be reminded of its limits. It is the story of courage and sacrifice, of music playing into the night, of lifeboats lowering into icy waters, and of strangers comforting one another as the great ship slipped beneath the waves. Today, more than a century later, Titanic still speaks to us. Her legacy lives in every safety drill, every lifeboat, and every rule designed to protect lives at sea. And her memory lives in the quiet moments when we imagine the starlit night of April 1912, the stillness of the Atlantic, and the great ship's final, solemn descent into history.